So Anna, after all these years, I got to tell you, I still get a little nervous every time I do one of these presentations or webinars.
Why? Are you afraid you're just going to mess up, say something wrong, or forget what you're talking about?
No, not really. Honestly, if people ask me questions and I don't know the answer, I'll just say something like, the answer is 42. Because if the person's a geek, they'll laugh, and then this topic will change to sci-fi. And if the person's not a geek, they won't know what I'm talking about, and they'll just look at me strange and walk away. So it's not really so much not being able to answer a question or forgetting something.
So, what's the problem then?
It's that the technology will fail. At any moment, especially when you do a webinar, your internet connection could just.
Well, Dan, I feel like that's why a lot of our customers have this fear of moving to the cloud. And it's a legitimate fear. Like, what happens when things fail? Technology fails all the time, right? We can't necessarily prevent stuff from failing, but what we can do is what happens when it fails and how can we be prepared to make sure that the end user isn't impacted. And for that, we're bringing in Mayank, who's going to be talking about what happens when the cloud fails. So Mayank, welcome to TechZone Live.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Can you do a little bit of intro about yourself? Like, what do you do at Citrix? Who are you? Why are you here?
Sure. Thank you. So I'm a technical marketing architect, and I work with you guys in the technical marketing team. I've been with Citrix for almost well, 9 years now. In April, it'll be 9 years. And I basically am handling the Citrix virtual apps and desktops pieces of the technical marketing portion. And my day-to-day job is to create this content that we put on TechZone and present to customers.
Awesome. So, can you tell us, Mayank, what happens when things fail? What can we do?
Yeah, take away
Well,
my fear of the cloud.
so there are a couple of things that we've got going, and one of those is a fallback to on-premises storefront. So specifically, if customers have a hybrid deployment, then they are able to display the on-premises storefront URL for the users to be able to connect to that on-premise storefront and continue to have access even if the workspace is down. So in a situation where the workspace is unable to load or the user is unable to authenticate because of service unavailability, then they can click that URL that's available on the web page and be able to get access to the on-prem storefront servers and then connect to their resources. Um, Important thing to note here is that this is only available in the Workspace web client, and therefore you should be able to try and access the storefront from the web, right? And this is to provide access to all of those users in organizations which have a hybrid deployment. And so that bridges some of the things that are not available for uh, the current scenarios, which we have completely cloud-based resources. So in that scenario, what do? We build in things like, we've brought in things like service continuity. So with the current SLA of 99.5% uptime, that's about 44 hours of downtime in a year. And with customers putting business critical applications on the setup, we want to reduce that downtime. And even if there is downtime, we want to be able to have users access their resources, whichever are available, right? So how do we enhance resiliency across for customers with high uptime requirements against a workspace outage or an Azure outage? Let's say identity service or workspace portal is down, or even maybe the cloud DDC. So what we do is we give them the opportunity to have this set of features that work together to get all those resources that can be available to them available. And this is sort of an amalgamation of two or three different feature sets. First one is the workspace connection leases. The second is utilizing a progressive web app inside of the workspace app UI to be able to showcase those applications that are available. and then building in crowd resiliency through redundant multi-node deployments across different geos to still have access. So let's look at what happens to a customer when when they're not able to connect to the uh, workspace. So they'll basically get this particular sort of a pop-up saying you don't have any apps available, and we want to change that to providing access to those applications that are still available and not give them no chance to connect to anything if the workspace is down.
You know what's funny is the image there that where the apps aren't working, before service continuity. You got that person there with the little speech bubble. When you put characters like that, in a speech bubble, doesn't that mean you're swearing?
Yep, I think it's basically them, us trying to bleep out customers saying what the happened.
Which is actually what a lot of users will be doing if they can't get to their apps.
Exactly, exactly. So we don't want them to have to throw explicitives at their workspace. So let's see how this actually works out in the real world. We have a Citrix cloud deployment, and this is the bottom part of it is a customer managed zone that is on premises. So really, what will happen is in a normal scenario, if the user is logging in, they'll connect via the Citrix Workspace app and connect to the workspace, which will retrieve the resources available to them. Right. Once that happens, the user can select particular application or desktop that they want to launch, and then an ICA file will be downloaded for them. And this is a single use authentication and authorization token for that particular user for the particular application. So the most important thing is it can be only used once. The next time user wants to access again, it has to be re-downloaded from the workspace. So in that scenario, what happens if the workspace service or the CWAT service goes down? You get a screen of, oh my God, what happened? So you're not able to retrieve those resources, and therefore the user is not able to click, ICA file can't be downloaded. In service continuity based paradigm, what we're trying to do is we're trying to replace the ICA file based solution with something that we call as a workspace connection lease. Here, the workspace connection lease is a long-lived authorization token. So it contains the list of authorized resources that the user can connect to, including your Citrix virtual apps and desktops. And it has the list of connectors addresses that will be able to provide access to those. The connectors use the localhost cache functionality to be able to build out that connection lease. And most importantly, it also for external users, it also contains the Citrix gateway service addresses that will be able to be used to connect to that particular workspace. So what happens really is that you get a long-lived token, and so basically you get a long time, like a week worth of authorization to be able to connect to a particular resource. So now,
And I think Ryan, can you talk a little bit about from like a security perspective, like now that they're long lived, can these be stolen? Like, can Dan steal my ticket, or how are we preventing that?
just give me one moment and I'll come right to that after I complete this particular slide. Is that okay?
Yep, perfect.
Sure. So in the scenario where the workspace service or the Citrix virtual apps and desktop service is down, we use the connection lease itself to build out the UI, and the apps and desktops that are available to the user can be taken from the connection lease. And then a user who is internal to, let's say, the resource location itself can directly connect to the cloud connector, and then they're able to log into the VDA that the connector provides the address to. Here you'll see that the user needs to authenticate to the particular VDA, because uh, we're not able to authenticate to the workspace, so there's no way to log in. So the user will always be given an authentication challenge. A similar thing happens when you're trying to log in from an external source, where basically you're going through the gateway service. And in this scenario, again, the user gets an authentication challenge. The only time that doesn't happen is when the user has session sharing enabled and they've already logged into that resource, or there is domain pass-through available on the network. Now, coming to your question regarding the security pieces of it, will the user, the connection lease security is actually built into the connection lease itself. It's something that we authenticate, and basically it's signed and encrypted using an AES-256 cipher, and the connection lease itself is signed on the endpoint with using a public-private key infrastructure. So the trust is generated using the client's private key. So if you change if you try to copy it to another client, then the private key will not be there, and therefore it will not be able to decrypt the connection lease itself. Also, uh, the connection leases are encrypted and signed, and therefore they can't be tampered with. So if you try to tamper with it, the signing breaks, and therefore the connection lease is not going to be usable. The other important thing with the connection lease is that you can have it be invalidated in situations where you have a stolen device, the device got stolen, a user's account has been compromised, or even if the user is no longer available in the particular organization. So those leases can be invalidated. Quickly coming back to what the actual lease is, it's a long-lived token, like I said, and it is configurable to be made available to be valid for 1 to 30 days. So by default, it's 7 days, and it is actually made up of 3 different types of files. One is the metadata file, second is a common parameter file, and the last is a resource location file. And for each of these resources, you'll have those 3 files available inside of your desktop. And it's stored in this particular location, which is basically your app data, local, Citrix self-service. It is the store name, then followed by the site name, followed by the user, and under the leases folder is where it is actually stored. Now, what is the actual user's experience when we have service continuity enabled? With the new service Citrix Workspace app that's 2012 onwards, you'll have the ability to have an X mark on top of the authorization dialog. And if the user is unable to authenticate because the authentication service is not available, or the workspace itself is not available, then you can basically click on the X mark and it will fall back to the workspace app UI. And that UI will show you the particular apps and resources that are available to the user. Now, as you can see, there is a banner on top which reads unable to connect to some of your resources. Some virtual apps and desktops may still be available. So those are the resources that are now not grayed out. Those are available to the user to click and connect to using service continuity. You have the option to try and reconnect to a workspace maybe 10, 15 minutes later. It's available, and then you click it and it repopulates all the other applications that you did not have access to. So there might be a question as to why are some of these icons grayed out and which some of them are not. So the important thing is that most Citrix virtual apps and desktop resources will be available. Things that are coming in from, let's say, on-premises site aggregation based resources will not be available with service continuity, as well as things like web apps and SaaS apps which require the access control service to be available. Those will be grayed out and not be available during an outage. Right? So
And I think this is really good, right? Because the end user also wants to be in the know sometimes when like you have no idea what's happening. So I like that you have that banner saying like, hey, we're having an issue, utilize these other resources that are available to you, and then, once things resolved, you'll have everything ready. So
sure,
I actually really think I like that.
it helps you to understand what is going on rather than just be completely blind to what is actually happening in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So we built this basically using something called a progressive web app. So the UI has been rebuilt based on this. So A progressive web app is a set is basically something that is a normal application, but it actually uses specifically feeds as well as a cache of resources on the to be able to build out the UI. Let's say the server that needs to aggregate the cache, aggregate the resources is not contactable, then the cache itself that is there on the application is used to populate the UI, and that is what the connection leases are going to be giving the application the set of resources that are should be made available, and then it pulls from the cache and populates the UI as you've seen before. So let's quickly look at how to configure service continuity. It's very simple. The first thing that we need to do is to configure the connectivity from the workspace to the user. One is to use gateway service. No configuration is required after that. Or if it's only internal, then basically you need to be able to have the workspace app connect over TCP 2598 to the connectors and the VDAs, and the rest is just the same. Now with workspace, when you get to workspace configuration, just need to go to service continuity, click toggle the switch that enables workspace continuity. This is site-wide, and here you get the option to configure your number of days for the lease to be active. It can be 1 to 30 days. By default, as I said, it's 7 days, and you can see below that there is a link to invalidate if you have lost a device to revoke the connection lease. And it's that simple, and you're done. So quickly looking at the demo on how to do this. It's very simple what really happens in the real world when the user tries to log in. On the left, you have without service continuity. When the user launches the desktop, they see cannot start application, please contact your help desk. On the right, it automatically logs in, launches, you get to authentication screen, and you have access to your desktop. It's meant to be completely transparent to the user apart from the grayed out icons. Lastly, just want to leave you with a few links that are there. The first one is the tech brief. If the organization wants to sign up for the tech preview, which service continuity is currently in, you can log into the link below, and on the right you can see the docs page, which contains all the information that you need regarding setting up and troubleshooting service continuity.
Mike, that's good information, because I know that's one of the big concerns with just relying on a cloud service is the availability. So it's nice to be able to see that users can still get access to their virtual apps and desktops, even in that event when when like this virtual apps and desktop service or the workspace service might be offline for a moment. So it's good to see there's that reliability built in. So with that, thanks for all the information you shared.
Thank you for having me.